It's 7 p.m., and I am so happy to get started with this Sunday night sit down. Patricia Scott, thank you so much for joining. I'm happy to have you here. We'll wait a few more minutes. Vianetta, hi, it's nice to see you here this evening. We'll get started. We'll let a few more people join, and then we will get started. I'll tell folks again that tonight I am all alone. I don't have Catherine. She is at a gathering tonight talking about Friday Power Lunch and Network Nova. And Michelle Hornish, my usual standby, has a lot going on tonight, so she won't be here either. So tonight, you guys will just get to have me. Hello, Vianetta. Patricia, stick with us for just a minute and we'll see who else is going to join. We'll give them just a couple of minutes and then we will get started. I have a lot of fun things that I want to talk about tonight. Patricia, I haven't seen you before. I don't think I have anyway, so it's nice to have you here. Keely, how are you? Nice to have you here. We're waiting just a few minutes, and then we're going to get started. But I'm going to try to give folks another opportunity to join us. I'm really excited. I am Finale Norton, co-host of the Friday Power Lunch, and tonight I am driving solo. So thank you guys for sticking with me. We have a lot to talk about tonight. We want to talk about Senator Lindsey Graham. I think that's pretty important. We'll talk a little bit about Maine, what's going on there. We'll talk about a little bit about Virginia, and then we'll just talk about how we are all feeling right now with all of the things going on. And I've got some thoughts about that I want to share too. So I'm going to give them just a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and get started, and everybody else can catch up because you guys are on time and they are not. So we'll give them just a minute. So hello, and thank you again for being here. So you guys, Keely, I don't think I've seen you before. How are you? Are you doing okay this evening? And Patricia, I hope you're doing well too. Vianetta, I know her, so I know how she's doing. You guys might be first time joiners, and I appreciate it. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Everybody else can catch up. So the very first question that I'm going to ask you guys is, and you can put it in the chat if you like, and we can talk about it, but I'll let you know what I think about it. Hi, Wilhelmina. Thank you for joining. I was just getting ready to get kicked off, but I think it's enough of us here that we can go ahead and get started. So my first thing that I want to ask you guys about is Senator Lindsey Graham passed away. I guess it was early this morning today is when we all heard about it. And I'm wondering how you guys are feeling about that. So if you want to put in the chat how you're feeling about that, I'm going to tell you how I'm feeling about it. And so here are my thoughts. I think that when anyone passes away, Democrats are obviously very different when it comes to this sort of thing than anybody else, because for us, there is always an opportunity to offer grace, especially to someone's family, because the family doesn't have a lot to do often with who they are. So I think everybody who has a heart and humanity would want to extend grace to their family. And I think that people have different relationships with people. And I've seen lots of Democrats come on and talk about Senator Graham. And I would just say that two things can be true. That you can certainly feel sad that someone has had a death in their family, and you can be sad that someone passed away. I think you can also be honest about the kind of person that they were and the kind of person that they became, and what kind of impact those things had on people. And I think that for all of the good that Senator Graham may have done, what he's done in this Trump administration is what lays bare for me in terms of all of the pieces of legislation and all of the things that he has talked about and shared about this president. I think that he has to be accountable for those things. Let me sort of give you an example. I think of all the people that I was reading about in terms of what they had to say about the senator. The person that sort of holds true for me is Steve Schmidt. And if you guys don't know him, Steve Schmidt is a former Republican, and he is probably a never Trumper. And Republicans sometimes are the ones who may be the most honest when it comes to how people are. And so here's what I think is important. And I love the way that he framed this. And I love the way that some others have framed it. Again, you always give grace. But here's what he said. He said, "Let it be known that exactly what Donald Trump was from the very beginning, that Lindsey Graham knew this and he chose him anyway. And there are going to be people who will say, well, he did that so that he could keep an eye on Trump and so that he could do certain things. You know, I think that we're accountable and responsible for the decisions that we make even early on. And the decisions that Lindsey Graham made in terms of how he was going to interact with Donald Trump, I think that became very clear. This is Lindsey Graham said about Donald Trump, and I think that we should remind people of it every single day. He said, "If we nominate Trump, we will get destroyed, and we deserve it." That was what Donald Trump said, what Lindsey Graham said about Trump. Here's what else he said: "I believe that Donald Trump would be an utter disaster for the Republican Party, destroy conservatism as we know it. We would get wiped out, and it would take generations to overcome a Trump candidacy." I just want anybody to tell me if that is not true. And he says, Donald Trump is not going to be the nominee of the Republican Party. If he is, it is indeed the end of the Republican Party. And I would ask anybody to tell me if it is not yet the end of the Republican Party as we see it. And what he goes on to say is that Lindsey Graham had a choice. He had a choice to either choose the country and the people in it, or he had a choice to choose Donald Trump. And he chose Trump. And I think that he has to be accountable for that. So in the chat, if you guys want to tell me what you think about that, if I'm wrong, you can tell me that I'm wrong. But I'm thinking that, Lindsey Graham had choices to make. If you just take a look at where this country is today, if you take a look at where we are with Iran, if you take a look at just the big, beautiful bill, as they call it, if you just take a look at sort of the chaos that many of us are feeling, I think that at the end of the day, rest in peace, Senator. But there's also accountability to be paid, and that's part of your legacy. And two things can be true at once. And I think that in this case, two things are definitely true. So that's my little thing about Lindsey Graham. And if anybody wants to put something in the chat or tell me about it, you can feel free to do that if you think that something different should happen. I see that Lauren Burke is here. Lauren, if you want to tell me something about Senator Graham, or if I'm misrepresenting what I think many people might be feeling about him, you can tell me that too. But I think certainly I've been hearing all of the folks on TV today talk about him and, how wonderful he was and he worked across the aisle and, all of these kind of things. While at the same time, we had a person in Texas shot and killed by ICE. And I just feel sometimes that based on all of the things that we see, that folks tend to say that they hold a certain amount of grace and sympathy for some people, like some people's lives are more valuable than others. And I think that that feels wrong to me. So if anybody else feels different about that, you can let me know. But I think that the person who died in Texas needlessly, that death deserves just as much grace and sympathy, just as the other three who died in Minneapolis. I think it's all the same. And we just find a way that some people deserve more grace and more credit, and their things are supposed to be more valuable. And I just don't think that's true. So that's my whole spiel on Lindsey Graham, if anybody else wants to jump in about that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about tonight that I thought was really important is all of the mess in Maine. And I'm not going to talk a lot about it because I have something else that I think that I really want to hear your opinions on, that I think is important. But for Maine, I'm not going to talk about Graham Plattner. I don't think is worth our conversation tonight. But we do know that we need to have that seat. That is really important if we want to claw back uh, democracy, the little bit of it that we can. If we want to restrain Donald Trump in any way, we need Maine. And folks are like, I don't know that we can win Maine. Well, this is what I would just ask you about that. If you think about what kinds of things Susan Collins has done, that people should sort of be questioning, whether or not she's really the leader that they ought to have in Maine, is Maine is a Democratic state. Susan Collins, for whatever reason, just seems to just hold on for the last 30 years, which is just sort of mind-boggling to me. But if you think about it, here's what she's done. She's made it hard for government to enforce environmental laws. She's overturned or had help, and she's really the person responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade. And it's also illegal abortion in so many states because of what she's done. She has had votes that banned all the voting rules for Black voters. She had a voice in Congress to talk about that. She did not. Universities from seeking out qualified people of color in their hiring. She's responsible for that. Um, Blocking kids from participating in high school sports that align with their gender. She's responsible for that. And she's just made it easier for Trump to send hundreds of thousands of people back to other countries that are not safe for them. So if you just think about the votes that she's taken and who she's helped put on the Supreme Court, there is a lot for people to talk about as it's related to Susan Collins. And I think that if people have those kind of conversations about what she's responsible for, as a Republican and as a Republican who has voted with Trump despite all of the things that we've seen, she's usually very concerned, but her votes don't seem to align with that. And I think if the people of Maine really are to listen to this and they find a candidate who can really articulate these messages, that perhaps Maine will still be in play. Now, I wanted to talk about states that are in play because, I have this thing. I had this friend because we all complain about stuff as activists. We complain about a lot of stuff. And one of the things that I've been thinking is that maybe, why isn't it that we just don't fight for every Senate seat? Why don't we fight really hard for them? Why do we just sort of look at the ones that we think are comfortable and then we just stay focused on those? Why don't we think about some of the other Senate seats? And I wanted to throw this out because I was having a conversation with some friends and I said, well, maybe Fetterman could be a little bit risky. So why wouldn't we find a couple other states that we'd focus on? And so I picked out 3 other states, and I want you guys to sort of think about it, and you can have conversations about this and tell me what you think. So I picked 3, and you're gonna think that I've lost my mind, but I promise you I have not. I picked, Mississippi, Louisiana, and South Carolina. And South Carolina, I picked these on July 11th. That's when I started doing this work. And I will tell you that I certainly didn't know about Lindsey Graham then. So let me tell you why I chose these states. I was thinking about what if we chose states that people didn't pay attention to, that you could sort of sneak in and really put some attention on them. And because of the environment and the climate that we find ourselves in, maybe there's some opportunity. Now, I want you guys to sort of talk to me in the chat and tell me what you think about that before I go on, because I'm going to see if anybody agrees with me. You can tell me if you think I'm crazy. So you can put that in the chat. I don't see it moving. So if you think I have lost my mind, you can tell me that. But I'm going to tell you now why I think this may be a good idea. So here we go. So Mississippi, we'll start there. Mississippi has the highest Black population share of any state. It has approximately 38% of its population is Black. Think about that for a minute. So if you were thinking about a state where you might be able to, um, get people excited about the possibilities, excited about what their futures could be, excited about, Mississippi, one of the bottom states when it comes to education and healthcare and a whole host of things. What might happen if you actually put a little bit of focus on Mississippi and what's happening in Mississippi? And now let me give you an idea of what's happening in Mississippi. Thank you, Gilbert. This is really good. So let me tell you a little bit about Mississippi. So Mississippi is one of the only 10 states that's not expanded Medicaid. They've turned down more than $2 billion a year in federal funding. How about that? 62 of the state's 82 counties are rural. How about that? And that's 54% of the population. And they are looking at multiple hospitals and health centers closing because of the big, beautiful bill. Now, what do you think about that? So what if you had a campaign outside of the normal campaign that focused on talking to those voters in very specific ways, talking to them in postcards that were really specific to their needs, text messages, phone banking, because we're from, we're not there. So there are only certain kinds of things that we could do. But what if we were to put ourselves out there and say, you know what? We're going to do what we can to help Mississippi get a Senate seat. All right, so just hold on to that one. Now, I got more. I got more. My second state that I've been working on, as I said, is Louisiana. And Louisiana has a Black population that's around 32%. Lauren, if you're still here, I want you to be sure to comment on this now. So Louisiana has a Black population of around 32%. Now, they use closed primaries, so it's a little bit different. You know that Bill Cassidy lost his seat because, he said something bad about Trump, and that's how that went. But my question is again, if you had a well organized campaign on the ground, really talking to people about what ails them, about really, I think you have to do both things. You got to tell people where the monsters are, but you also got to tell them what the possibilities are, what their life and what their future can look like. And so let's talk about Louisiana and what's happening there. Louisiana, another one, it did expand Medicaid, but is still among the states hardest hit by the federal Medicaid cuts. So what about that? And both Bill Cassidy, who's not going to be there, and John Kennedy both voted for the bill containing these cuts. So quite frankly, you got a lot of Black voters here, but really, even if you are not a Black voter, don't you care about this? I mean, don't you care about hospitals closing? Don't you care about being able to get someone in your family into a nursing home if you needed them to? Don't you care about making sure that your kids get educated? This big, beautiful bill took trillions of dollars out. So not only do you have to worry about the hospital or the nursing center, you can't even get health coverage. And if you don't have health, what do you have? And then, so the last one, South Carolina. So again, if you guys are with me, just say you're with me because this is important. So the last one, of course, is South Carolina. And the Black population in South Carolina is around 27%. And the reason that it keeps on winning is because Lindsey Graham is so inbred into this community. But there's a lot wrong with South Carolina too. And now I think that there is, a bigger opportunity. Let's see. So here's what Lauren says. The Democratic Party will not spend dollars on a ground game in a high percentage Black states because it forces them to spend on Black consultants. They will not do it. The big consultant dollar is in TV. And Lauren is absolutely right. But guess what? That is not where the people are. People are not on TV in that news. They are, if they're young, between 18 and 35, they are on YouTube. They are on Snapchat. They're in all of these other places. But you know where else we can be? We can be delivering mail to their mailboxes, and we can be calling them on their phones. We can be sending them text messages. We can be the people on the ground filling in the gaps and doing what we know ought to be done. Okay. So Courtney says the sad truth seems to be that people don't care until it directly affects them. And she is absolutely right. But guess what? We are going to tell them, or we could tell them how it directly affects them and what's coming. And what we do know about specific groups of voters, that people care about different things. If you are minority voters, the things that you might care about that affect you may not be the same as how it affects someone else. So what I would say to voters, and I think people have heard this before, if you are in Louisiana or Mississippi or or Louisiana, Mississippi, or South Carolina, if any of them get a cold based on what's happening, you know what happens to Black voters? They get pneumonia. So people know that. They understand how that works. And we understand that the numbers may not be as big, but the percentages are higher. And so I think, and again, in South Carolina, very same thing, same kind of opportunities, hospital, healthcare, all of these things are going to be met as a disaster for Black voters, but it will be a disaster for all voters. And we know that many of these things are happening now, but they're going to be happening after the Congress meets in 26 because that's the way that it was planned. And I'm just saying that there may be a huge opportunity for the grassroots to decide that we're going to pay attention to what no one else is. And could we come together and figure out how to do that? Now, now you're wondering where I'm going with all this, but I have a place I'm going. And let me tell you this place. The place that I am going is I was having a conversation with people, and we were talking about how we felt after the 24 election when we lost. And, you know, I went for a little bit without the news, but I jumped back in pretty soon. But there's a lot of people who jumped out completely. They were just like, too much, can't take it anymore. Um, done. And a lot of people continue to do work, and a lot of people just said, I'm not doing anything. Obviously, it did not matter, and so I'm done. But I read this amazing article this week. I had read one article earlier and it sort of broke my heart. And I just was like, how in the world did we get here? And I want to tell you guys what that article was. I'd read this article in Esquire about Roy Cohen. And if you guys don't know who he is, I'll bet you do. It is the lawyer that the president talks about all the time. And I think his famous statement is, "Where's my Roy Cohen?" And so I was reading an article about Roy Cohen. And if you guys haven't, I would encourage you to read it. The man was a monster, a true monster. And many of the things that the president does today come from this particular man. It's the kind of tactics that he used. And he was awful. And when I say awful, I mean awful. And for a minute, I just thought, oh my God, we have a president of the United States who thinks that this person who mentored him is the way that he ought to treat people in this country. And I think that you guys have seen it. So I was feeling really bad. But by the time I finished that article, I got to another article. And this article was this wonderful article by Christopher Armitage. And he writes for the Existentialist Republic. And it's called Why Try? So listen here. Why try? And the article really goes into all of the details, and it tells this wonderful story about whether or not you should do anything at all. Because a friend of his said, why am I doing anything? It doesn't matter. And what he went on to say and tell stories about is all of these people who worked tirelessly, some of them, because he also talks about the importance of resting. But he talks about these people who did some of this amazing work. And for the work that they didn't even see it because they died before the work happened. He gives the example of one man who was the first one to write an article about slavery, anti-slavery. And before he could even see any of the repercussions, what happened, the results of that, he died. But he had brought William Lloyd Garrison in, who was one of the famous people, a famous abolitionist. And he actually gave all the credit to this gentleman because of him being there. Now, he didn't get to see it, but the work that he did mattered. And so he also gives the example of a person who goes out and canvasses. And he spends an entire evening canvassing, but he goes home thinking that it didn't do anything and that he probably wasted the whole evening. But at the end of the day, what he doesn't know is that one of the doors that he knocked on changed the person's mind and he ended up voting. But the guy never knew it. He never knew it. And so the point of all of this is that you never know what the results of your work is going to be all the time. But the point is that you find what you can do, big or small, and you do it. You figure out how to do it. And so I know that for many of us, sometimes we're tired and we're just feeling like whatever thing it is, big or small, that it doesn't matter. But guess what? It does matter. And so if you haven't had a chance, I did an article and I would encourage you all to read it. It's Choose a Lane. Your actions will matter to someone. And the reason that I think is so important is because everything we do is centered around politics. One of the things in the article that I'll tell you about, we're having my family reunion in 2 weeks. And we were doing a little bit of history on some of the people in my family. And one of, my aunts, my great-great aunt, she was married in 1901. We were so excited about that. We were able to find it when she got married and who she married, and it was just really cool. But then I said to my husband, I was like, "Ugh, gosh, she got married in 1901, working as a farm laborer, and she didn't have any rights at all." And it really made me sad. And my husband says, you can make anything about politics. And I said, I can, because everything that we do is touched by politics. There is nothing right now that's not touched by politics. And so what we have to figure out is how do we take what we do, no matter how big or small, and make it into something else? So we all get really angry about what the Democratic Party does, and Lauren is right about consultant spending and all that stuff. But I have another friend, and here's what she said to me. I was complaining about a bunch of stuff, and she sent me this really fantastic article. And she said, the article basically said this: whatever it is that you're complaining about, figure out what piece of it you can do yourself and then do it. Hear that? Figure out what piece of it you can do yourself and then do it. And I've got a lot of ideas about some things that we can do, and I'll bet you a lot of you do too. Because here's one of the things that I want us all here today, all 13 of us, because that's what we got, but we'll go out and more people will hear what we have to say, is that we tend to think that, at least I do sometimes, that more people are smarter than us, that they know everything, and that our politicians are going to fix stuff. But they're not. They actually work for us. And sometimes the smarter people are actually the 13 of us, because you're on the ground, you're talking to people, you're out there, you see what's happening, you feel it, you know what moves people, you know what moves your audience, you're a public square. And they don't know that. And so our opportunity is to engage as many people as we can, and that the things that we do really do matter. I often tell a story about the starfish, and I'll bet you that you guys have heard this in terms of the work that you do. There's a man, he's walking along the beach, and there's thousands of starfish that are along the beach. And as he walks along, he's throwing back the starfish. Another man comes, who I think also represents us. He's tired, he's exhausted, he's just, feels like whatever work you do is not enough. We can feel that way too. But then, so the man is tossing back the starfish, and the guy says to him, "I don't know why you're doing that. It doesn't matter." And the guy looks at him as he tosses the starfish over, and he says, "It matters to this one." And so my point in all of this is that no matter what's happening, no matter how bad we think it is, no matter how tired we are, no matter if we think Louisiana and Mississippi and South Carolina are out of our reach, it could, in fact, be the little things that we do that make a difference. And it may not make a difference today or tomorrow, or in fact, we may still end up losing the election. But we just don't know if the little things that we do create a whole lot of awesomeness down the road. And I think that's what the most important thing is. So tonight, as for the first time in forever, that we actually end on time, I am just going to say, for all of us, if you haven't chosen a lane that you can participate in, whatever the thing is, big, small, or little, choose it. If you happen to follow Network Nova and the Friday Power Lunch, we're having our summit August 21st through 23rd, and we're going to have a lot of things that people can do, big, little, or, maybe really, really small, but it just doesn't matter. You can choose to participate in them, because we got lots of ideas, because you guys have lots of ideas too. So again, I'm going to say thank you all for joining me tonight. Catherine will be back next week, and I'll just say, choose a lane, chop, chop. You guys have a fantastic evening. Have a great evening. Thank you guys for coming. Good night.